So while we were writing up our Twitter form, we added this sign-in key, which was a global key. At that moment, I told you not to worry about it because we're going to cover it in a later lesson. Well, this is that lesson. There are two types of keys, local keys and global keys. Global keys are generally used to find a specific widget. That's actually what we use for our form. Since we wanted to be able to get access from a different part of the application, we added a global key for it. Now, local keys are there to solve a very specific problem. It's to help to make sure that widgets of the same type do not get confused. Now, in order to explain that, we're going to go back to the widget tree. If you remember, the widget tree is just a blueprint for what your app looks like. And then there's also the underlying element tree that is in charge of location and where that widget is. It also tells the widget which state belongs to that specific widget. But the bad part is it doesn't have that much more information other than that. So you use keys to kind of give it a little bit more information so that it knows what's going on, so make sure that the right state is associated to the right widget. Let me show you through a couple examples. Okay, so here's a very simplified widget tree. We have a row, a text, and a column with two container widgets. Note that these containers are both of the same type. They're both container widgets. However, this situation only happens when you have both a stateful widget and you are manipulating widgets of the same type. So we have this widget tree. Whenever something changes here, this section gets rebuilt. Now, how does it get rebuilt? It checks whether this widget is the same type of widget and if it needs to get rebuilt. This is done because let's say you have a big widget tree and there's a bunch of other widgets down here and a lot more. You don't want to have to rebuild literally everything below it. So then let's say we have the case, let's remove the state for a second, of these two container widgets swapping places. So let's pretend that one moves over here, this one moves in this spot, and this one takes its spot. Your widget tree will start going down the list. We're saying all of this gets rebuilt. So it'll go down, it'll check here. It checks, is this equal to a container widget? Pass the check, so then it does not need to get rebuilt. And it gets assigned the state of blue. The same thing happens here. It checks down this widget tree. It checks if it's equal to a container widget. It is. So it gets assigned the state of red. And that's of course not true. We literally just swapped these. They're supposed to be the other color. And that's where keys come in handy. So keys add an extra little identification for each widget. So for this one, let's say we do C1, and then this one is C2. Now we know C1 is supposed to be red, and C2 is supposed to be blue. This time, we're swapping places. The column checks, is this equal to C2 like it was before? And it's not. So it means this widget needs to be rebuilt. It doesn't just rebuild it from scratch. It actually looks if it's anywhere else in the application. It actually does find it, but it makes sure to assign the right color to that one. Then we do the same exact thing with C2. You check, is this equal to C1? It's not. Looks through all the widgets, finds that blue is supposed to be associated with it. Now this way you make sure the same color stays with the same container just like you want it. You could think of it like an identification number. Let's say there's two people named John Green, and maybe they're even twins, and then they decide to change their hair color. You'll still be able to tell them apart by taking a look at their state ID and seeing that their identification number is associated to the correct John Green that you were thinking of. Now we're actually going to go and showcase this specific situation within our code. Okay, so I built out an app called the Color Swapper. We're not going to go through all the code because it doesn't really matter, but the important thing is that we have these two squares that when you click this button, they're supposed to swap the colors. Do that using the insert method, which takes the tile at position 0, removes it, and inserts it in position 1. So the one that was in position 1 moves over to 0, and then this one moves over to the other one. Now at this point, we don't have any keys assigned to them. So there's no keys, no nothing, and when we click this plus, nothing happens. But let's say we add a unique key to both of them. We save it and rebuild the application. We'll click on it and they swap. If we actually click Control-Shift-P and open the widget inspector, we can notice the actual swap happening. So you see the color tiles, they have this key number, so C0, C2E. If we click the swap and refresh, you'll see the second one will be the C0, C2E. There we go. They swapped. And if we remove it and rebuild the application, we no longer have a key associated to it, but you can still see which render object it's using. So render object is the actual thing getting displayed. Remember, there is the widget tree, element tree, and the lowest level is the render tree. All you need to know here is that the render object is the actual thing getting displayed, and we can see the identification for it here. So we're looking at the first color tile. We'll see the render object associated with it is 78D5C. If we click swap and we refresh, you'll see nothing changed. We have the same exact render object. So this is the situation where you need to use keys. You might not need to use them too much, but if you ever run into this situation, you definitely need to know how keys work. You'll probably use keys a little bit more commonly, and we even had to use it within our signup form. And that is the basics of keys.